I'm Dave Piotrowski, and this is my Reflection 1 presenting the problem presentation. My client's Kathy May Winnie, and she's the president of the May Winnie Cancer Foundation. Kathy developed the foundation in 2004 after her husband passed away from lung cancer. Lung cancer is the leading cause of death among all cancers, accounting for 160,000 deaths per year in the United States, so it's a very serious issue. Kathy's foundation focuses on education, outreach, and preventative screening for lung cancer. Right now, though, Kathy identified a problem in her organization, specifically that there's an inability for her to grow her foundation due to limited funding and a lack of personal time. Kathy highlighted many areas where she wants to make a positive impact and grow her outreach, for instance, in minority communities. However, she is not able to do that due to a lack of resources. So to determine if the problem Kathy presented is the actual problem, I used the problem identification process presented in class, as well as Dwayne Sprowlin's article, Are You Solving the Right Problem? And I'll summarize my analysis here. For the problem identification process, the first thing I did was I analyzed the results gap. And the way that Kathy presented her problem, she presented as an increased desired results gap where her current achieved results were not at the level of her desired results. So from there, I decomposed the possible reasons for this gap and came up with the following three factors: a lack of fundraising, a lack of manpower, and the stigma associated with lung cancer. Of those factors, I felt that lack of funding was probably the primary factor for the gap. And so I disaggregated funding into multiple levels so I could identify the causes. And the causes that I found were both internal and external, and there was some overlap from the causes based on the previous identifications I did. So internal causes included a lack of personal resources, time, education, experience, and money that Kathy had. Another was a lack of subject matter experts and contributing volunteers. So Kathy was kind of doing everything on her own, and she doesn't seem to have a lot of support. External causes that I saw were a lack of educational resources, a lot less advocacy for lung cancer. Again, that's partially associated with the stigma of lung cancer, and that's especially evident when you compare lung cancer outreach to outreach like breast cancer. So from there, I also performed hypothesis analysis based on those causes, and I created a bunch of different hypotheses. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but one example of a hypothesis that I did was the May Winnie Foundation lacks a solid fundraising base due to missing central connectors in Kathy's social network. So I have a bunch more of those hypotheses, but those hypotheses will be beneficial to tailor my primary and secondary research as I go about solving the problem. Another thing I pulled, this is from the Sprowlin article, was putting the problem into a larger context. And so I mentioned lung cancer has this negative stigma, and it's just not as identifiable compared to other types of cancers. And so this kind of creates an information void that really needs to be filled. And there are a lot of lung cancer organizations, and they're trying to get the information out there. But Kathy is very aware of this void, and she really feels like she needs to solve it. And unfortunately, she just doesn't have the resources to do so. And I feel that this creates a strategic imbalance where she's not prioritizing her time and resources correctly, so she can't see the forest from the trees, and she's not really accomplishing small goals because she's so focused everywhere. So based on this analysis, I defined two related problems. First, the May Winnie Foundation lacks a realistic strategy that matches their current capability to their desired goals, and also lacks internal capabilities and processes to fund its organization at its desired level. So the consulting methodology I plan on using to solve these problems is a combination of the operations problem-solving approach and the hypothesis-driven approach. With the operations problem-solving approach, I've already identified and defined the problem, but now I need to identify and evaluate possible solutions to the problem and then provide implementation recommendations. So I like the operations problem-solving approach because it's linear, it's relatively straightforward, and due to the limited amount of time and scope we have to accomplish this project, I feel like the structure of it is beneficial. At the same time, I also want to incorporate the hypothesis-driven approach, specifically for identifying possible solutions. I've already created a fair amount of hypotheses through the problem identification process, and I think I can use those hypotheses to assist me in solution identification. I also think that the hypothesis-driven approach will provide more creative outside-the-box thinking, while the operations problem-solving approach is a lot more linear. Key questions I want to ask Kathy as we find solutions to the problem are really kind of personal questions, talking about her motivations as well as her current capabilities and potential capabilities. So questions like, what are your primary strengths and weaknesses? What are your fundraising priorities? If you can only focus on one aspect of fighting lung cancer, what would that aspect be? Would it be fundraising? Would it be outreach? Kind of just, again, focus her a little more based on her current resources, and then we can build a plan to develop that as we increase fundraising and really define that strategy for her. Finally, when I present the problem to Kathy, I just want to be sure that I'm providing analysis of how I went about structuring and defining the problem, similar to what I'm doing now. Then I want to highlight my key findings from that analysis and then disclose the problem to her. Key to presenting my definition of the problems will be presenting them clearly but also sympathetically. Again, she's very emotionally invested in this, so I want to be careful not to say anything harsh or something that can be misinterpreted. Finally, though, another key thing with the problem is presenting a way ahead. Obviously, that's what we'll be working on over the next few weeks, but at the same time, just giving her an idea of, okay, here's the problem, but this is how we're going to solve it, would be very beneficial, and I think it'll develop increased teamwork between my group and her as we go about solving the problem. Thank you for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.